Welcome to the Wonderland cardigan. For the front you'll be needing two pieces, of course, right and left, and the facing is integrated in the pattern. We are overlocking the curve here, and that just gives you a really neat finish. Then we're going to put the button there and hey presto. Then we've got the back, and the back has got the facing on it. It's cut on the fold, same with the facing, and the lower edge of the facing and the shoulder seams will also be overlocked. Then we've got the sleeve, and that absolutely needs to be two-way stretch, whereas the body of the cardigan doesn't have to be two-way stretch. That can be just a nice sweatshirt fabric. And then we've got the hood, and normally the hood you would do, if it was in sweatshirt fabric, just out of the one side because it's roughened on the other side and actually looks really lovely anyway. But as you can see, I'm using this teddy fabric and my inside didn't look very nice, so I decided to use a really lightweight jersey to line it. Then on the outside, the rim of the hood can be adorned with roses. You can do a contrast, or you can do matching, like I've done on one of my cardigans. Make sure that you snip the front so you know where the center front is basically, and then there should be another snip for the beginning of the hood. And then reinforce the area where the buttonhole is going to go with a little bit of Vilene. You can also interface the whole lot if you think that your fabric needs it. Now we're going to do a whole lot of overlocking. So we're starting with the front, and we're going to overlock the shoulders, and then we move on to the side seams. And then at last, we are also doing the curved part where the facing is. Then we're going to overlock our sleeve. So either side, you also want to overlock the hem. Then you do the back, the shoulders and the side seam, and you do the same on the facing. And then you're already sewing. So we're now putting together the curved back of the hood. 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way around, and we repeat that of course with the lining as well. So do both, and then you can iron the seams apart or just leave it and just finger iron it a bit, which is what I did. And then with the wrong sides facing each other, you're going to put both pieces together and pin all the way around the edge. All we need here is a holding stitch. You can see there also my snips. That's so I know where to turn in my hood, and that's all marked on the pattern too, of course. And now we're going to sew all the way around. Just sew from the side where it doesn't push. If you find your jersey really pushes and it ends up to be like you have more jersey than, you know, it just pushes it over the edge, then just turn it over and sew it from the other side. Then turn it in. You've got your snips there. It's 2.5 and 2.5 centimeters. You can of course vary this a bit. If you're unsure about this, then watch the introduction where I explain all about the snips and what you can do. So here I'm just turning it in all the way around, and now we're just going to top stitch this. And the good news is, of course, with teddy fabric, if it's not quite so tidy, nobody's going to see it because there's so much fluff. You don't even see where you're stitching half of the time, so that's all good. So sew all the way around, and then also do a holding stitch at the lower end. It's just so it can't slip out, because that would be really annoying if you realize that, say, like your jersey slipped out when you're sandwiching this between your layers at the neckline. That would be so annoying. So just do it like this, and then we are going to just snip off anything that stands over the edge. So my jersey pushed a little bit and I just let it, but don't let it push too much over, just a little bit like this. A centimeter is okay, like anything else is a bit much. Now we're going to put together the body. So with the right sides on the inside, we're going to place the front onto the back, and we're going to close our shoulder seams. Again, we've got a centimeter seam allowance, and you could use a triple stitch or a side zigzag. I didn't do that here. It's not really that pressing, especially if you're using sweatshirt fabric. And then iron the seams apart. Next, I'm going to also close my sleeves while I'm there, and again we can then iron that apart so the sleeves are ready. And now we've come to this point. You can see the overlocking here, and we just need to put the back facing onto the front facing. Yeah, so flip over your back and put the front on top. There you go. Right sides together, and then I'm going to stitch these with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, iron that apart, and then the hood goes with the right sides facing each other. So the right side or outside of the cardigan and the outside of the hood starting at the center back facing each other. I work my way to the front, and of course there should be a snip here and a snip further in where the hood starts, so make sure that that's nice and even, and pin it all in all the way across. And then the facing part also gets pinned too. So what I'm doing usually is just line up the shoulders again with each other here, and then just take the pin out and move it over to the other side. Some people might not find this is a good technique for them. They would prefer to stitch in the one side first and then do the other side, or even tack it, and of course you can do that. I prefer it like this, but that's really preference. And now I'm going to stitch all the way across from one side to the other, and that's it basically. And here I forgot to press record, so I've already done it. And the next step after sewing it in is then to overlock it. Depending on what fabric you use, mine is really stretchy sweater jersey fabric here, so I didn't need to snip the curve here of my seam, but that depends on your fabric. Next, we're going to fold over our facing, so right sides facing, and stitch through 2.5 centimeters from the edge. Cut back that seam allowance, and now I'm going to overlock that all the way across, and that's basically my hem. So quick. There we go, hood inserted. Just move out my corners, make sure it's all nice and flat, and then I'm going to make sure that my facing can't move, that it's not in the wrong position, so I'm going to pin it to the front. You don't have to necessarily leave the pins in. You could just stitch this with a holding stitch again, but when I'm on a roll, I want to get things done really quickly. I just do a pin. And I also did prick myself, I have to say. And then the facing at the back, you could stitch this down from the outside with a double needle or something, and it might look actually really nice, but I didn't do that. It's not necessary. Turn your sleeve to the right side, and then there is a snip indicating which is the front, and where your right thumb is towards the front as well, kind of thing. So that's your right sleeve. So go through the right side of your jacket, yeah, and that way you know you've got the right sleeve in there. So if you have your sleeve pointing towards the back, then you know that you put the wrong sleeve in. You want to secure first the side seam and the sleeve seam on top of each other, and then the sleeve head on the shoulder seam, and then at the lower part of the sleeve it goes in really flat, and at the top you have to hold it in a little bit like that. And you cannot say, oh no, there's too much. There really isn't. It's exactly the right amount. It's actually almost tight, and I usually like to hold in a lot more at the top, but since this is a really quick and easy jacket, I thought this would just frustrate some of you. So it fits in exactly. So if it feels like it's a little bit too much there, that needs to be like that. You have to get all of that in. And then when you pinned in both of your sleeves, you can at the same time also do your hem, and that's turned up 2.5 centimeters, same as you've just sewn when you folded the facing back. And we're just going to top stitch that from the outside as well. So let's go. Let's stitch this all in. When you do your sleeve, you want to stretch it a little bit, or you want to use the triple stitch or zigzag, slight zigzag stitch. That's really important because otherwise there's going to be too much stress on that seam, and being a stretch fabric, then the thread will just break and you will have a hole. So if you don't stretch it or you don't use those 2 stitches, then that will not work so well. So all the way around on both of your sleeves. And now I'm going to do my hem from the outside, and I'm going to sew with a distance of 2 centimeters. That's 5/8 of an inch. You can see it on my needle plate. I've got the centimeters, look at the bottom there, you can see the 2, and at the top it's the 5/8 of an inch. And yeah, I find that really hard. I can't get used to these inches, but I do try to put all the inches into my instructions. So next we're going to overlock the armhole, and then after that we put our button on. And with a button, it's actually quite important that the buttonhole is not too close to the edges, especially if you use a really big button, because you don't want it to stand over. So 1.5 is what you need at least to go over to that side, and I'm going 2 centimeters down. So put your button on there and check that if it's sitting in the corner, it doesn't go over the edge. And because my button is no way fitting into my gauge at the back of my buttonhole foot, I've used a button of similar size and put that in the back, and then put my sensor down, and I can put my buttonhole in. On some machines, it has to be said that that sensor makes huge buttonholes. I don't want to name any names because I get all these comments underneath it like, oh no, my machine's perfect, but do a sample one first and check that it's the right size. And if it's too big, then just take your button out and make it a bit smaller. And finally, we are going to turn in our sleeve, and we're going to do what we Germans call a witch's stitch. It's like a little cross stitch working from the right to the left, where you pick up a little bit of fabric or fibers, and then you create this little cross, and that retains the elasticity. And if you want to see this close up and a bit, you know, me taking a little bit more time to explain this, then go and find the video from the sewing workshop, and I've also linked to that in the description below, and that will explain this in some detail as well. And that's it really. We have come to the end of our cardigan. Here it is finished. We've got a lined hood, but you can do the single hood as well, and how to do a flat fell seam will be in your instructions. There's a lovely diagram, so you can't go wrong. The button I've used is from Mood here in Los Angeles, but you can order these type of buttons over the internet from Mood. They are fantastic, but that one was $6.95, so it's not cheap. Now it's time to make your own cardigan, and I hope to see you soon with another tutorial for the Winter Wonderland collection. Bye!